All of us know about it. Either we talk about it or we talk about it, but not the way we should talk about it. So it's a very powerful topic. And the title of the presentation, and I wish you could see it, but maybe next time. The title of the presentation is The Power of Tribalism. Now, of course, this is meant to just be an introduction because there's something that's coming in September that I would love for you to keep an eye out for because it will be power packed. Now, before I dive into tribalism, I'll give you a bit of history background so that we can be able to see what exactly it looks like and on what levels we can actually see it. Now, as we're continuing, keep these questions in your head. What's discrimination? Just think about it. What's discrimination? Now, I went to try and find the definition of what discrimination is, and it says when someone or a group of people are treated less favorably than others due to their personal characteristics or background. And it can occur at both individual and structural levels. And it can be harmful to individuals and also to groups. Now, there's a very important test that was done sometime in the 40s. Some of you might know of it. It's a psychological analysis, but it's more of a practical test that was done, and it's called Brown versus Board and the doll test. How many of you at least have seen a video of a doll test being done? This is where either a black doll and a white doll are put together, or three different colors of a doll are put on a table, and children are asked a series of questions. So one of the first questions they're asked is, oh, which doll looks prettier? So which doll do you think the kids picked? The white one. The other question was, which one do you think is kind? Which one do you think the kids picked? The white one. Which one do you think is pretty? What do you think the kids picked? And most of the kids in this test that were asked were children who look like you and me. It wasn't white children who were answering, these were black kids. So after they asked all these nice questions, and then there was a question of, which doll would you like to look like? Which one do you think they picked? The white one. The question was, why? Why do you want to pick, or why do you think you should look like the white one? It's prettier, it's nicer, it doesn't hurt people, it's richer. So all of these things, now bear in mind, these children are less than 6 years old, and they're answering these questions in that way. Then they asked a question which changed the children's faces. Which doll do you look like? And they answered, the black one. Which one looks more like your family? And they answered, the black one. Now, there was a similar test that was done years later in Singapore, actually. So in Singapore, there are three main groups that are there. There's the Chinese, there's the Malay, and then there's the Indian. So they put three dolls, which looked like each represented in that country. Similar questions were asked. One, is good, the Chinese one. Some of them were asked, what color would you like to have? Beige skin, because that was the Chinese doll. Skin. And then most of the children didn't want to look like the Indian doll, because in Singapore, the Indian is last, because they have darker skin. They did a follow-up, the same day they did that test, they did a follow-up of questions. Now this time, all these little images, because they had images of, Chinese children, they had images of Indian children, and Malay children. But this time around, they asked them, what's this doll's name? Or what's this little boy's name? And they said, we don't know. But when they were asked initially because of the color, they classified them, right? This time around, these children or these images were given names. So now they asked the kids, what's this one's name? And he said, oh, that's Raja. Oh, he likes this. Now the dialogue changed because now they had a name. They were no longer a color or belonging to a certain group, but they were now children who had names, who had lives, and who had things they liked. So it changed a little bit when there was that personal indicator of who they were. Now, there are some things we're going to look at in history or history's lessons, because it always is nice to learn something new from the past. So I lived in Argentina for about 15 years. And at the beginning, I was the only person of my class. And walking down the streets, I remember exiting the doors at the airport and thinking, oh, a celebrity is coming around. And I'm like, why is everybody looking this way? Maybe there's someone who's coming after me. But I noticed as I pushed my bags this way, the eyes followed. And I was like, maybe this way. And the eyes followed the direction I was going. Now, Argentina doesn't have very many people, or didn't have at the time when I went there, people who looked like me. So the eyes that were following me, it's because it was like, what's this now in our country? We've never seen this. And I remember going to school, and at first it was like, wow, who's this person? And everybody wants to come and talk to you, but you don't speak the language, so now you become even more strange. And you'll be walking down the streets, and my favorite thing was always, you know, somebody taking a picture. Or someone saying, oh, can my family take a picture with you? And I'm like, I don't know where that picture will appear. But those were the experiences. It was strange for people to see someone like me in the country. Okay, we can see different people, but the deeper you go into the country, the story changes. And my school was inside. So in the 30s in Argentina, 1830s, not 1930s, they had some civil wars because the country was split in two. It was split into the Unitarian and then the federal. Now, the federal side of Argentina was mainly Buenos Aires, and they're the ones that had all the capital, they had all the money, they were the movers of things. But the ones who had the land, where they could grow crops, they had the animals, was the other one, the Unitarians. So they had a series of fights among them, and civil wars is, in any place there's civil wars when you're trying to fight over control over resources. But they decided, you know what? The indigenous people in the South, they're losing land to people who are coming in from other countries. So what should we do? Let's go take over that land. Now, as they were taking over the land, they divided them as well into different groups. There were some that they said, okay, these ones are good enough to be with us. These ones are kind of in the middle. And then these ones we can get rid of. So there was what they called the Desert Campaign. They went to fight the indigenous people, and they wiped out quite a few families. And they killed about 3,200 indigenous people the first time they did it. The second time they did it, it was more. But the first time they did it, it was all in the name of we're trying to secure our country. How many times do we hear we're in the name of something, people are getting killed? Because if we look at today, a lot of people don't like talking about Israel and Palestine. But that's a people that's getting wiped out in the name of we were here first, or in the name of something. And that's common when we look at different places in the world. Then we have something else that happened in the 70s, 1970s, 1980s, but that's here, mainly in the US. We had this boom coming out of HIV. And there was a specific group, right, that was singled out as the ones that, these are the carriers, these are the ones spreading it. It's mainly for them. It was known as the gay disease. Now, the reason why I'm telling you these stories is because I want you to notice that there's always been this thing of a division. This group, that group, this group, that group. So when it came to this disease, when we look back at the desert campaign I was talking about in Argentina, there were two things that were affected. First, it was the political side, because those don't look like us, we can't mingle. And because those don't look like us, we need to have what they have. And then there was also, they can't protect our land because we know better than they do. Now, I know I mentioned Argentina, but let's just think also Africa. How did colonization happen? Didn't we have, trying to fight with our bows and arrows, our spears, and then somebody coming in with guns? Oh, they don't know any better. Let's take care of things for them. If we look at the homosexuality that I was talking about in 1970s and HIV, 7,700 people were affected by the disease. And 3,500 died before anything was done. Because it wasn't a disease that affected me and my heterosexual spouse, but it was one of the homosexuals. So they found out about the disease in fact, in 1981, and it took about 4 years for anything to be done. And they knew, the CDC had found out this is what it is, this is what the disease does, but it took 4 years. Why? Because somebody higher up didn't take it seriously because it wasn't affecting them. Let's now jump to one of the most famous genocides you've ever heard of. Which one is it? I didn't even have to say it first. Have you ever thought about what was behind the genocide or why the genocide happened? Because most of the time we just stop on what happened. We don't look at why things happened, right? So when we look at the genocide in Rwanda, I don't like history lessons, but today I'm giving one. So before 1930, the three main groups in Rwanda, the Hutus, the Tutsis, and nobody knows the third one usually, the Twas. So there's three. So initially, those three were not divided as, oh, this is just this tribe, this is this tribe, this is that tribe. They were one people, they spoke one language, but they were called Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa, but they were peaceful because they had one king. Then what happened? The country was fine. In fact, it wasn't even a country before, right? They were fine. They were doing well with their king. There was no division of, you did this, you did that, I hate you, you hate me. They all lived peacefully. Then in 1930 or 31, what happened? Can anyone guess? Colonization. That word, there's just something about colonization. So in 1931, they were colonized. And then in 1932, the colonizers, who were the Belgian colonizers, they decided to separate them and say, okay, Hutu, because you look like this, Hutu, Tutsi, you look like this, Twa, you look like this. So now they divided them into ethnic groups, into these tribes. And then they forced them later down the line to start carrying the ID cards. Now, I know I'm talking about Rwanda, but when you look at your Zambian ID, what are the things that are on it? tribe, chief, village. They want to know exactly who you are, where you're from, and who is your chief. Now, when this happened in Rwanda, now the colonizers started saying, okay, the Tutsis, you guys don't really look African because your features, just your facial features look different from the Hutus. So the Hutus were classified as Bantu. The Tutsis were actually classified as Hamite or Hamitic, that word, but they were classified as Hamitic, as those who came from the line of one of the sons of Noah, Ham. And then the Twas also had their own classification, but they're a smaller group, so even I overlooked it, so forgive me for that. But they also had that classification. Now, the colonizers decided the Tutsis should be given better jobs. In fact, when it comes to things of power, they should be the ones who are in power. They should be the ones who are ruling over everybody else. And the Hutus, yeah, maybe they can do something else. They can go to school just to become maybe priests, but not to run the country. And because the Tutsis were always being given better situations, better, thank you. My mind went to Spanish. They're being given better privileges. If you have 2 children and you're always favoring one, what happens between them? Separation. They hate each other. They're not going to be friendly to each other. One's always going to want to do something to the other. Even though the other said, oh, but I'm doing this for me and my brother. But they're never going to see it as we're on the same level playing field. That's what happened in Rwanda. So now the tables turned, the Hutus fought back and they gained power. And now the tables have turned. The underdog is now the one who's on top. Now we have the power. Why don't we get rid of the ones who've been overpowering us for so many years? So there were talks of peace at some point that failed. But on April 6th, in which year? 1994. The president of Rwanda was killed, and also the president of Burundi. They were in a plane, a rocket hit their plane, they both died. And then for the next 100 days, some genocides that happened, which we don't really talk about, but they're there. I wanted to put World War II, but it's too long. Too many things happened, but a specific group was affected because they identified with that specific group. Of course, there were other people who were also affected, but there was a major group in there. I want us to also think of the Bible. Because I know sometimes when we talk about discrimination, we think it's not in the Bible, or we see it in the Bible and we say, oh, the story of the matter is that we need to look to Christ because that's where our salvation comes from, which is 100% true. But there are certain people in the Bible who practiced religiously discrimination. And who are they? I'm hearing the word. The Pharisees mainly. I know. The Jews towards the Gentiles. And then within the church, it was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the Samaritans also were discriminated against, right? Now, somebody who proclaims to know the truth, to know the word, to be a leader, are they supposed to be telling you, you can't believe or you can't be a part of this because you are not born in the right family? Or because your words or your beliefs, you come and talk about this Jesus, but that's not what we believe. So you're disqualified. Now, I know sometimes we don't really think of this discrimination. It's very raw and in the wrong place. Because the church can be the place where everybody is welcome, right? And you have people who are supposed to be welcoming, telling you, you're not good enough. So when we look at these times in the Bible, we see a lot of that. And of course, I will touch on Jesus and just how wonderful he was, because how he handled things was very different from how these leaders were handling things. Let's bring it a little closer to the US. Let's talk about slavery. When we look at slavery, there's what we call the slave mentality. And the slave mentality divides two sides of the coin, because there's two types of mentality within the slave mentality. There's the mentality of the master and the mentality of the slave. When I was reading about this, there was something that caught my attention. And of course, I know it's very practical, but reading it was just very raw. The slave literally lost all control and all power of their life. Every aspect of their life, it was given to someone else. And the master believed, I'm the one who has full control over this person, and I can decide whether they should die, whether they should live, whether they should give me a child by forcefully making them give me a child, or even if I don't want the child, I'll still force them. So the mentality is that a lot of people had given up within their hearts of ever having a life, even though they yearned to be free. So that was almost like you've put a ball and a chain on somebody who wants to sprint, and they know they have every possibility and every capability to sprint. But because you've put that weight on them, and you haven't even locked it, just by seeing it, they know I can't do it. That's what the slave mentality is. And it goes beyond just slavery. If we look at addictions, it's the same concept. The addiction will tie you and say you are unable to, you are not powerful enough, you cannot take this off, this is a part of you, I own you. Is he, what? And they're like, oh, okay, no, that's okay. Because, you know, the East and Mambwes, those are good people. I was like, okay. But then the girl from Chipata, Mwami, in fact, no, from Fue, with Chief Mkanya, went and found, or was found, by a Tonga man who said that, no, you're going to be my wife. And I said, yes, because he's a good man. So for me, when I was asked now, so who are you dating? I was like, he's Tonga. And they're like, yeah. Now, bear in mind, my family was excited. I think they just wanted me to get married because I was getting old. But no, they were excited. They said, you know, he's a man from a good family, because they knew the family. Remember the first example we talked about about the doll test. They had a name, they had a family, they had a background. He was not just Tonga. Now, I've been a part of this very powerful group that has looked at tribalism from so many different angles. They've dissected, in fact, we have dissected it, and it's everywhere. I am a medical doctor. I'm not practicing here in the US yet, but within the health field, there are tribes. Surgeons, when the surgeons see those who are in internal medicine, these ones, they know too much, but they don't do anything. And then the surgeons, they do too much, but they don't know anything. It doesn't matter which country I'm in, it's always the same. So when we look at tribalism, we see it in the church, we see it in politics, we see it in psychology, we see it in finances, we see it in health, we see it everywhere we look. And there were some questions I wanted to ask. What does it look like when you talk about tribalism in your own group? This is just, think about it. We joke about it, and we're allowed to joke, but some jokes are poison. And the reason I say that, it's really sad that I couldn't have done this in a different, because there was a video I really wanted you to see. And it's in Australia. Every time an Aborigine walks into an area where people are, you can almost see that he comes sit here and somebody moves away. Or a lady walks in and someone is watching, like, what is she buying or what is she doing? Those things, I remember them happening to me in Argentina. So it's not just the Australian, and I'm sure even in Zambia. Oh, my husband always jokes and said, those from East, they are thieves. So, so now in my head, I'm like, was that thief? What was the last name? That thief that we heard of in Zambia? Oh yeah, no, the last name was Dembo. I'm like, no, you're right. You know, they were from the East, but they might seem like jokes, but they're very, very inflammatory. And we have to be careful with how we say things, who we say them to, and why. So the summary, I know that when we think of tribalism, and I really want to just invite you, September 14 and 15, this year, not next year, this year, we're going to have this panel with all these different specialists in their area talking about this, breaking it down, and just getting it out there so that we see it more clearly. Because right now, it's just the surface that I've introduced. But the thing is, we'd love for you to also come with questions, because I'm sure there are many questions. How is it that this with your area, how did you identify it? And you're faced with things, or you've seen them happen, or you're in politics and you've seen these things happen. So September 14 and 15, we're going to have this discussion. Participate. Before I finish, there's this image. I don't know if, I know you won't be able to see it. So there's an image which shows two villages. And let's say my village is saying, this is our glorious leader. This is our great religion. This is our noble, populace. And all those who are going to fight for us, our heroic adventurers. Now, those on the other side in the other village are saying, that's a wicked leader. They are primitive and they are superstitious. They are savages. And these ones that are coming are brute or brutish invaders. What side of the coin are you on in the face of tribalism? Are you the one who is saying they are this, they are that, without understanding who they are or why they do what they do? Or are you on this side who's saying we are this, we are that, we are better than everyone else? Because bear in mind, there's a negative on both sides and there's a positive on both sides. And the only way that peace can be achieved is if what? With dialogue. So are there any questions quickly before I say the last thing? Whatever question will come, bring it in September. And I want to close with this. If Jesus spent so much time with foreigners, with social misfits, and tribal outcasts, and saw the importance in who people were, not what people saw on the outside or where they came from, why can't we see the same value if we are Christ followers? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I know you had so much to say, but I have to commend her. And I'm not trying to shame other speakers. She's disciplined with time. So another big round of applause. Now, before you go, where's the husband? Come here, my friend. Yeah, you come here. You come here. You know, they have a question. I have a question for your husband. And I will please the family life director in this home. So I noticed when your wife was introducing herself, she's this, she's Dr. This and this and this, but she said, I prefer to be called Mrs. Chambwa. I saw you moved around. Now, they need to know what was going on in your mind. Can you explain what was going on? All right. I'm giving trouble to my brother, but you may go sit down, but you can walk the aisle again together. We're gonna have a piece of music again, and then we'll break into the other one. Amen.